Excellencies, heads of diplomatic missions, ministry officials, stakeholders and partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. In the last few weeks, I've been mutating from one role to the other. So I'm eagerly waiting for the vetting process to come to an end and Parliament to finish its business so that I can stop mutating. But nevertheless, I'm happy to be here with you this morning so that I can share some thoughts and at the same time inaugurate this very important journey that you have embarked on. So I'll be making my formal speech shortly, but let me, I'm slightly taller, is it? Okay. Let me just start by making a disclosure. In 1982, when I was a student at the University of Nairobi, I also had my brush with the law, and I also spent my few days in custodial territory. So I can understand a bit of what is being talked about here, because we spent some time as students after being rounded up in 1982 for allegations of having been involved in that process. And some of us spent time. So I have a fairly good idea of what it means to be behind the bars. But that is for here. So I am delighted to join you here today for the launch of public consultations on the development of a legal framework for correctional services. This gathering signifies a powerful convergence of minds, a collective commitment to our shared vision of a prosperous and harmonious society. Together, we stand at the threshold of transformative change in the management of corrections in Kenya, ready to embrace new horizons and strive towards a better tomorrow. The exercise we are launching today comes at a particularly critical time, given the tensions that persist between the rights of offenders and the aspirations of our people to a more inclusive Kenya. The state of our correctional services institutions, including congestion in prisons and poor living conditions of our correctional service staff, have widely been criticized. Indeed, any conversation about correctional services elicits emotional issues about human rights abuses, corruption, drug abuse, and other vices that we really need to correct. And I will come back to this specific area towards the end of my remarks. This process, therefore, marks a new dawn in the government's commitment to overhaul the legal framework for correctional services to align it with the Constitution and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Our responsibility is to develop a robust legal framework that complies with universally accepted standards and helps to improve the livelihoods of our people, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. The Constitution upholds important commitments, advancement and administration, including correctional services. Furthermore, Kenya is a signatory to various international statutes with obligations in relation to the fair and just management of offenders. I am pleased to note that the bill we are discussing here will amend the Probation of Cap 64 and Community Service Orders Act Cap 93 and repeal the Prisons Act Cap 90 and the Postal Institutions Act, CAP 92. The overarching goal is to ensure the legal framework for correctional services are in line with the Constitution and upholds universally accepted international standards and best practices. In fact, the PS was telling me that once this is done, Kenya would be the first to achieve this particular unification. In that case, then it must be done. The bill will move forward the vast majority of previous task force reports and recommendations, including the National Task Force on Improvement of Terms and Conditions of Service for members of the National Police Service, Kenya Prisons Service, and the National Youth Service. The direction we are taking will enable us to tap into the collective wisdom and resources of the global community and ensure that corrections, transformation efforts are not isolated, but resonate with Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the East African Community Vision 2050, among other international obligations. This will provide an opportunity for us to amplify the impact of our initiatives, foster partnerships, and most importantly, contribute to a more just and secure world for our current and future generations. I wish to assure you that my office will support the current efforts by the State Department for Correctional Services to expand opportunities for the transformation of our correctional services in the country. My office will also oversight and coordinate the process of developing the new legislation, including ensuring constructive public participation and stakeholder engagement. This will enable us to develop an acceptable legislation that responds to the challenges we have experienced in managing correctional services. Let me encourage our development partners and stakeholders to actively work with us on this journey by supporting the reforms being undertaken by the Department of Correctional Services, as well as the wider security and criminal justice sector. This will enable Kenya to benefit from the emerging skills, investments, and networks driving correctional services on the global stage. Let us appreciate the leadership of the State Department and the Technical Committee for spearheading this important exercise. The experts involved bring together a rich blend and diversity of skills, competencies, backgrounds, and experiences that will contribute to the success of this process. I also wish to recognize the International Development Law Organization and all other partners and stakeholders who have passionately contributed to the success of this initiative. Finally, let me assure Kenyans that this exercise is being carried out with utmost good faith and intentions for the betterment of our people and our country. So, what do I wish to contribute? Because I think we've started off to a very good start. Just sampling the comments from the various members, and indeed the position also taken by from Kruini. I said I wanted to come back to, you talk of congestion, you talk of how do we deal with the conditions and so forth. I want to I did not in other countries, and I'm sure you have that, in other countries, there is a public-private partnership arrangement where custodial facilities or prisons can be developed by the private sector on a PPP basis, and then meeting the standards and the requirements that designs in the legislation. You can then have private sector investing in these facilities, because a government will have enough money to undertake this exercise. Somebody talked of the mothers with children, but they are in custody. There could be a blueprint of a design of facilities of this nature, which then can be brought out on a PPP basis, then developed by the private sector. And these are the kind of facilities that mothers who have to undergo that challenge can go. People with disabilities may be required from time to time, perhaps, to also face correctional services. What kind of facilities are we putting them in? So you can actually work with the private sector to develop this, and it will be easier because then you don't have to put your money directly into it. It's done, and through a proper arrangement defined in law, these facilities can be built, and you can reduce within the custody and the preserve of the department and the government itself. But this, I believe, is a window that we have never exploited in this country, and it is being exploited, and it's being done in other countries. If you walked in a lot of the other cities, whether you are somewhere in Europe, you'd be by walking past a prison and you would not know that it is a prison. It's been built to standards, and those standards can be done. So my contribution as a public member of the public is that in your document, please make provision legally where you can embrace private sector involvement in reducing the infrastructure capacity that you are facing. Because the government may not have enough money for that. The taxpayer may not have enough money for that. So please consider that. The other thing that I may now want to say is that it is true that there is the Maraga report, and I just want to assure our men and women in uniform within the prison service that their matter is receiving very high level attention, and as the Director General the Commissioner General did mention, it's going to be addressed. So it's important that I also put that on record so that we don't have undue anxiety. And I want to assure you that the PS and the new commissioner have been very, very aggressive in reminding me that there was a presidential directive that must be upheld. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, let me thank you for being patient, and also to say that just listening, there is a lot of knowledge in this room, a lot of knowledge and experience. Utilize it well so that we can have the best bill, the best framework going forward. So it is now my privilege to officially launch the public consultation on the development of legal framework for correctional services. Thank you, and God bless you all.